people in the building. It's good to see, and also people tuning in from home. Just a quick notice before we begin. The first Wednesday prayer meeting this week is starting earlier. It's starting
today. And I came to Bath to study pharmacy 4 years ago, which I've just finished. And I've attended this church for the past 4 years. And in about 3 weeks' time, I'm moving to Sheffield to start my job in the hospital there as a pre-reg pharmacist. So I'll be on the wards all day.
It's good to hear someone say Bath. I like that. I like that. So today, as we said, we think about this issue of control. And I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about the idea of control in your life? Have you struggled with this? What have you done to try and be in control?
Yeah. So control is a funny one, especially in the church. I feel like Christians can get good at saying the right thing, and they can have Christian lingo, and they can say phrases like, oh, God's got it, and like, God's in control, you don't need to worry. And we can say one thing and completely do the opposite in our own lives. And so I have told people, you don't need to worry, you don't need to stress, God's got it. And all the while I am stressing and not giving God control over my life. And so, yeah, there are things that I will give over to God and things that I won't readily give over to God. And you can give over 90% of your life, but if you keep that 10% to yourself, you're still not giving God your whole life. And giving God control over my friends and my family, my social life, and even my grades after quite a reluctant time of that wasn't so much of an issue, but the issues of food and body image and exercise and all of that was something that I really kept hold of, and I didn't want to give it over to God. I didn't think I needed to give it over to God, but I clearly did. And these issues started when I was about 13, so I've dealt with them for about 8 years now. And yeah, it's an issue that society knows that people can get control over. It capitalizes on it, that issue that people do feel bad about themselves, the way they look, but also that it can be changed, that it's easily changed. You see on TV at the moment, like, shows about losing lockdown weight in 20 days, and like, media really portrays this as something that you can be in control of so easily. But it was more than just something that I could physically control. It was something that mentally I had some control over. So when I was a teenager, and friendships and puberty and like grades and everything, it feels so out of control, but if you can have control over one thing yourself, it was a very mental control thing where I could gain some control over my life.
Why did you feel like you needed to be in control of something?
Yeah, I guess just with everything changing in my life, and obviously when it happened when I was 13, I was quite young, but with school and with grades and things, I was quite a stressed out child when it came to studies. But there's only so much you can do until that test paper comes in front of you and you have no control over that. And this is just something that I could control and I could manipulate in a certain way to change people's opinions of me also, I thought. Yeah,
because I've known you for a few years, and you do seem, on the surface, you seem very confident, very in control. Is that not true then? Underneath, do you feel in control?
Yes, I am probably quite a confident, extroverted person, but I think it can be easy when you're allowed to ask other people questions and to make it all about them, and they feel good about that, and they can talk about themselves. But you almost deflect the conversation away from yourself, and you stop other people from asking deep questions about you and being concerned about you. And so, in a way, confidence and portraying a sense that you're like quite okay all the time is a massive deflection from the truth. I think just being loud often can deflect from what's actually going on.
And hide the fact that you don't feel in control. Before you mentioned God, as a Christian, you obviously believe in God. You mentioned giving stuff over to God. Where does God, or where did God fit into your thoughts on being in control?
Yeah, so with the issue of like eating and everything, at first I didn't really see anything wrong with it. I mean, medically, I obviously saw that you can't sustain yourself without fuel, I guess. But I was getting affirmation from people around me, which when you're 13, I would just like to say, never tell a 13-year-old that they look better when they lose weight, because it's not great. But if you're having affirmation from people around you and you're seeing things on the media and you're seeing things that this is not a bad thing, then you're not going to see it as a bad thing. But also, there's bits in the Bible where it talks about greed and that that's not a good thing, and also the importance of self-control. And I saw this, and obviously you're going to try and manipulate it to make it affirm what you're already doing. And it perpetuated this fear of gaining weight. I thought that if I didn't have control over this situation, then like in a few weeks I would be one of those people who would be in a bed and couldn't get up because I was so big. And I know that sounds stupid, but it's this fear that as soon as you're not in control, the whole situation becomes out of control. And God just didn't fit into it. And if he did, then it wasn't an issue. I would pray to God that I would lose weight, not that I would be out of this situation. I very much felt stuck between a rock and a hard place, where I could either be in control, and medically it probably wasn't great for me, or I could be greedy and big, and medically also that wasn't healthy. So I didn't really know where God fit into it. But yeah.
And can I ask, with trying to say restrict food and control your food, did you feel like you were in control of your situation? Did you feel in control?
I think sometimes I felt in control. I think as it perpetually got worse, this happened twice to me, and both times it got worse up to a breaking point. And at first you feel in control, and sometimes when things are going wrong in your life and you need a bit of control, it can feel quite satisfying to know that this is something you can change. And I felt in control when people would affirm me in it and tell me that it was right. So
what happened next? Did anything change?
So, because this happened to me twice, when I was a teenager and when I went to uni, I tried to fix it in 2 different ways each time. So the first time I got to a breaking point and thought, okay, I'll let go. I'll let go of control, not give it over to God, just let go of control. So the whole situation became out of control, and that the sense of control got replaced with shame, and so I used my confidence, I guess, that definitely increased then. And it wasn't confidence, it was just me trying to deflect. And it would be me making jokes so that I felt in control of the situation, I guess. Even though I'd let go of control of my body and my weight and things, I was trying to be in control. I thought if people were laughing at me, they could laugh with me, at me, instead of them laughing at me behind my back. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Go for it. Add more, please.
But that obviously didn't last very long. I had replaced control with shame, and that doesn't work either. And I was going off to uni, and it felt quite good. And then I went on holiday just before I came to uni, and got typhoid. So I was in hospital, and I couldn't eat for a couple of weeks. And obviously, if you don't eat for a couple of weeks, you lose weight. And that kind of triggered those things back in my mind of, oh, this is nice, like, I feel in control a bit more. And so at uni, I just slid right back into it, and it got worse and worse, to the point where I knew everything I was putting in my body. I knew every step that I was running, or every time I'd go to the gym, exactly, measurements, everything. And yeah, it was stupid because I felt like I was giving things over to God, and I was probably the best I had been spiritually all my life, but I just hadn't given this over to God, and it wasn't working. And again, I got to a breaking point, and it really affected me mentally, because if you don't fuel your body, you're not going to have energy for the day. So my mood would just go up and down and up and down, and obviously people around me noticed that. It was exhausting for me, let alone everyone else. And once I got to that breaking point, thankfully there were people around me who were concerned, and thankfully they were Christian. There were obviously non-Christian friends as well, but there were Christian people who pointed me to God, and just made me realize that God could be in control of the situation. It wasn't me or no one, it was me or God. And ultimately, even if I thought I was in control, I wasn't. God was in control. I realized that actually my identity could be placed in God and his love for me, as opposed to how much I weighed or anything like that. I just learned that God loved me even when I didn't love myself. And society likes to say the solution to all of this is to love yourself a bit more. And then the Bible tells us that we're fallen and that we're sinful. And those two things don't go together in my head. How can the situation be solved by loving ourselves more? But then you read in the Bible that God unconditionally loves you. And you realize that actually, if you wake up the next day and you don't feel like you want to tell yourself that you love yourself in the mirror, that God still loves you, even at your worst points. And that was a lot better than replacing control with shame. I just put God in control of my life.
So you've mentioned a bit, but what about if someone's feeling fairly in control? Why would anyone want God to be in control of their lives?
So God is the person who made the whole entire universe, and we might think that us gaining control will solve everything, but it won't. God knows the beginning from the end, and we can look at things with hindsight and be like, oh, we should have done this. But God literally knows the beginning from the end. Like, hindsight is not even a thing. Like, he's so above that. And if we give control over to God, he's always going to have our best interests at heart. He does things for his glory, but he wouldn't do things that would not be in our best interest ultimately. And so, I guess, why wouldn't you give God control? I mean, he's already in control, but
What does giving God control look like as such?
So I guess just praying to God when you're in these situations and just so for me, it just meant looking at my body as a vessel of worship and knowing that my body was made so that I could worship God. And so putting food in my body wasn't anything to do with myself. It was fueling my body to worship. And my body isn't under my own control. Like, God made it. God will sustain it. Everything I get is a gift. Like, the food that I get given is a gift from God. And I guess just putting God in control of that and going, do you know what? If I eat a bit more today, I'm not going to suddenly gain like 10 stone in a day. Like, God is in control of this, and he won't let things get out of control because he's in control of it. And that sense of shame just goes because you know that you're completely loved.
So could you give us maybe, like, nowadays, an example of how this change in attitude towards God and control impacts your life day to day? Does it at all?
Yeah, it does. I can wake up and feel rubbish about myself and just be reminded that God promises that he loves us and that his promises are true. And it's not to say that I don't ever think about this, because I definitely do. I don't think I'm out of the woods. It's just a bit less thick forest. But yeah, I wake up every morning knowing that God is in control and that I don't need to keep this situation under control. It is under control. And I can just rest, and I can just be at peace with knowing that someone else has this, that this isn't my responsibility to keep everything going. That God is keeping the whole universe going. I think he can keep my life going.
Yeah. And for someone who doesn't know God, the idea of this God being in control, they almost don't know how to feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're a Christian, you know God. And for you, knowing that God is in control, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, I guess the idea of putting someone else in control, if it was another human being, that would not be right. That would not end well. But I think it comes down to remembering that God is perfect and that this isn't a flawed person being in control of another flawed person. This is someone who is completely perfect and loves you completely wholly. And so God being in control of us wouldn't end badly because he is perfect. There's not a sense of like a power struggle with it. Like, God is he's got all the power anyway. And so, yeah, I would say if you're not a Christian, you're like considering the idea of control and whether God should be in control, I would just learn about who God is and learn about how perfect he is and how loving he is, and how he isn't this guy in the sky that dictates everything that happens and he's completely distant. Like, Jesus, he sent Jesus to walk on this earth and he gets it. He's not completely abstract from everything and reality. He completely understands it.
That's great, thank you. So, to finish, what would you say to someone listening, either here or at home, who is desperately trying to stay in control or just feels like everything is out of control? What would you say to them?
I would say there is it's not there's two options where you're in control or you're out of control. There is three options. Either you can think that you're in control, you can think that you're out of control, or you can place your control into God's hands. And I would just say that your identity should be based in God and not in other people. And so your control over situations, once you place your control into God's hands, your identity just becomes a son or a daughter of him. And that gives such freedom from that control. You no longer have to prove your worth because God's already accepted you, he already loves you. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Megan, for being so open with us about your struggles and your past struggles. We're now going to watch a video together. It's a song, and it's a song called King of the World. And it sums up very well what we've just been talking about. It tells us about this God who is in control. He is the one who is King of the world. So we're going to watch this video together.
Try to fit you in the walls inside my mind. I try to keep you safely in between the lines. I try to put you in the box that I've designed. I try to pull you down so we are eye to eye. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? I try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Just a whisper of your voice can tame the seas. So who am I to try to take the lead? Still I run ahead and think I'm strong enough when you're the one who made me from the dust. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? I try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Ooh, you set it all in motion, every single moment. You brought it all to me, and you're holding on to me. When did I forget that you've always been the king of the world? Try to take life back right out of the hands of the king of the world. How could I make you so small when you're the one who holds it all? When did I forget you've always been the king of the world? You will always be the king of the world.
We're going to read from Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, he lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolation he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord God Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." And that's particularly poignant to the message of control, that God is in control even when times are hard and when things don't feel like they're going right. Especially verse 5, God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of the day. And it's just a promise that every single morning God will provide and God will still be in control of our situations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Megan, and thank you for sharing so frankly with us this evening. Now, have you ever wanted someone to take responsibility of something for you? Something that's stressing you out? A situation that needs resolving? A decision that you just can't make? A problem at work or a crisis that you just need someone to step in and sort for you? A while ago, I used to be a lawyer. And I remember a particularly bad week that I was having. Everything seemed to need doing at once. Everything. My cases were completely overwhelming me. My clients wanted more from me than I had to give. I had an ever-increasing list of calls that I had to return, and on top of that, I had documents that I had to file at court. I had to draft them first, and if I didn't, there'd be consequences. And it was getting too much for me. And I didn't know what to do. And I don't know how he knew. I guess it was my tone on the phone. It was probably sighing and other frustrating noises coming from my office. But suddenly my boss appeared in the room. He was a great guy, actually. I was very, very fortunate to work for him. He didn't say anything, actually. He literally just walked in, walked to my filing, picked up a big stack of files, and walked out of the room. And I called after him, and I said something along the lines of, "What are you doing?" And he just said, "I'll take care of these." And I made some really half-hearted attempt that I didn't mean to persuade him otherwise, but I really didn't mean it. And in that moment as he walked out, I just felt myself returning to the surface and like I could breathe again. I wonder if you're familiar at all with that sort of feeling where you just want someone to take control, to take responsibility. Now, that only works if it's someone you can trust, isn't it? If I didn't respect my boss or I thought he was rubbish at the law, that wouldn't have helped, would it? I would have been worried I'd be in a worse position by the time he'd finished, but it wasn't like that at all. He was someone that I could trust, someone who could make me breathe more easily. And in some ways, I think that points us to what we've been learning about already this evening. See, the Bible does teach us, as Megan said, that we are not in control of this world, and that's something you may be all too aware of. But someone is, and that person is someone we can trust, even when the unexpected, the difficult, or the profoundly disappointing strikes. We don't need to panic. We don't need to try and hold on to whatever control we can find, because there is someone who is both good and powerful in control, exactly what Megan was saying. Someone we can know, someone who understands your world, and in fact understands you better than you understand yourself. And those thoughts stand behind this psalm that Megan chose for us to look at this evening. Now, a psalm is just a poem or a song, and for many of us, poetry isn't the first place we turn when we need help. But this is a little different. See, the psalms in the Bible are there to connect truth with the real world in ways that you can feel and believe. And the core perspective of this poem, the truth it's trying to connect to us, is that real shelter, real comfort in life is found in relationship with God, because he is good, powerful, and in control. You may have noticed when Megan read the psalm, it's not about small stuff. It speaks about the earth giving way and mountains collapsing. It's speaking of what we regard as most solid, most permanent, and most reliable collapsing under us. It's poetry, but it's talking about having your world uprooted. And some of you will know exactly what that feels like in one way or another. It may not be my experiences at work, may not be Megan's experiences, but you know that feeling that the earth is dissolving underneath you. And of course, sometimes the advice we're given, isn't it, with dealing with that sort of thing, is that nothing's really as bad as it first seems. Try to find the silver lining, the hidden piece of good news, the reason it could be worse. But that's not what we're told here. There's no denial in this about the size of the problem, no attempt to bring it down to a different scale. He doesn't downgrade the size of the problem. What he says we need to do is upgrade our view of God. Verse 1 puts it like this: God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. True comfort comes from a relationship. See, my boss helped me out because he was both a great guy and a great lawyer. And God helps us because he is great at being God and he loves us. He can be our God, like the psalmist says. We can know him. He is very present. He can be there with you in whatever you are passing through. This is all about a relationship. I don't know if you picked up on that, but the poem doesn't say that God can give you help. Doesn't say he can give you refuge. Doesn't even say he can give you strength. It says that he is our strength and our refuge. He himself, it comes from relationship. Now, in the midst of a storm and a struggle, we can seek all kinds of shelter. We know that. There's the obvious stuff: wine o'clock, retail therapy, escapism, exercise, all of those things. But of course, those things that can give us that sense of control, all of those things don't actually change the problem at all. There's avoidance. Sometimes we do that. We pretend the problem isn't there. I'm sure we have all done that at one time or another. You stick your head in the sand. There's anger. We get cross with other people. We get cross with our kids. We get angry with God, the universe, or anyone else that we didn't get the breaks, and that's why we feel the way we do. Or we try managed anxiety. If only we can shrink our world to a size we can control, then we'll feel better. So we try strategies, we try withdrawal, we try to-do lists, we try memos, we try inspirational quotes, we try all of those things. Or like Megan described, we can pick something that feels like that is the thing we can control, and maybe the feeling that we get from controlling that will help us in the rest of our lives. We feel at least if we've got a handle on that, we might have a handle on something, and we can feel like we're going to stop spinning. We all tend to do something when we feel that control is slipping. And what the Bible says here is we do need a refuge, we do need strength, we do need a shelter. But the place we were created to find that is in our God, not in anything else. Every other hiding place will ultimately fall short. See, the psalm speaks of destructive forces, upheaval, raging seas. But it also speaks of a river that makes people glad. Now, water can be a destructive force. We see that every year when there's flooding. But it can also be cool and refreshing and good. And that's what the author is trying to point us to. There is a place, there is a way to live your life where your deepest needs for refuge and comfort, your greatest thirsts, in fact, can be met, where you can find water for your heart and your soul. And that place is in knowing the God who made you. Because Megan said he stands over all of the world. He stands over all the concerns of this world. He is not controlled by them. That's why there would be hope, even if this world collapsed. That's what the psalmist is saying, the writer, that even if the apocalyptically awful happened, he would still have hope. Because there is someone outside this world, outside all the things you can see, who you can trust for refuge and strength. And that's the invitation the Bible gives to you and to me, the one Megan was speaking of. Now, that might all sound very fine and good, but as I was thinking this through tonight, some immediate questions came to mind. Now, I don't think I can answer everything tonight, but these were the ones that came to my mind. And I hope, although these responses will be brief, at least they'll show you that it's worth thinking these things through. Now, for a start, we might say, well, that's all a bit vague, isn't it? What do you mean, have a relationship with God? What do you mean, giving control to God? Because in one sense, having an invisible friend doesn't sound like much of a coping strategy. But the psalm does repeatedly emphasize that God can be with us. He can be relationally close. And the whole Bible, the Bible as a whole, tells one story. It's the true story of reality. And there are bits of that story that I think almost all of us will be familiar with. Like Christmas, when Jesus is born. And Megan spoke about that, the difference that it makes that Jesus actually came. And when he's born, one of the names he's given is Emmanuel. And that name means God with us. When we work through the Bible to the Gospels, the books that tell the story of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when we get there, we find out what it means for God to be with us. Because Jesus is God in the flesh, God in history, God with us. Jesus literally puts flesh on the bones of this psalm. Now, you think that sounds interesting in any way this evening, you need to read more about him. See, looking to Jesus, the real Jesus, steers us away from being a nice idea, a dream, a platitude, into something real and concrete and something we can grasp. But I guess another crucial question would be, why, if God's exist, do we have trouble in the first place? Couldn't he just fix it rather than help us in it? If he's that powerful and he really cares, why does the world look the way it does? Why do I have these things that make me wish I had more control? That's a serious question, and serious questions don't tend to have simple answers. This is just the start of one. But as I said, the Bible tells the story of reality. And if you read the start of the Bible, it doesn't start where we are now. When it starts, you'll find a world that is perfect, one without flaw, one without any trouble or pain or anything. No one worried about anything, no one worried about what anyone else thinks of them. And a world where we see God face to face. But that's not this world, is it? We all know that far too well. But you see, the Bible carries on that story. It tells how this world got shattered because our relationship with God was shattered. We and this world were designed to live in harmony with him, but we chose to go another way. We chose to go our way in God's world. Now, for sure, it's fair to say the world was broken when you and I arrived in it. But we've all added to that picture. We've all done our own share of ignoring the God who made us, living in his world as if it was ours, what the Bible calls sin. And that means we don't naturally enjoy the relationship we've been speaking about. God seems like a distant stranger. And in fact, it's worse than that, because you see, because God is in control, we'll all answer to him one day. Many of the images of the psalm point us towards that. God cares about his world. He cares about every single person in it. And he cares about good, and he is against anything, no matter how small, that is bad. And everything that's done or thought that's wrong will be accounted for. But you see, that thought again brings us to Jesus. You know Christmas, but you probably know something of Easter too. See, Jesus didn't come just to be close. He came to restore what is broken, to bring us back into a good relationship with God. And that's where Easter comes in, because there we see Jesus taking control in the most amazing way. See, he took responsibility for everything that you and I have ever done that was wrong. Everything we have to answer for. He took that, he came into our office, as it were, he picks up the record of wrongs, and he took it on himself at the cross. Now, there's so much to say about that we don't have time for this evening, but again, read the Gospels, those books about Jesus for yourself, and you'll see it. Because even when you feel great guilt or shame, God wants to be your refuge. That doesn't need to drive you from him. He can and he will deal with all of that. You don't need to retreat into shame, as Megan says. That doesn't work. But the last question I want to raise is this. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't mean my problems will go away, does it? If Christians never had any problems in life, then everyone would be one. You know, Megan still had stuff and still has stuff that worries her. People in churches have cancer and COVID and everything else you can think of. They lose their jobs. They get dementia. So really, what difference does this actually make? One of the last lines of the psalm is this. God says, I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Like Megan says, the Bible tells us a story. It has a beginning. It explains how we got here today. But it also tells us where the story ends. Because Jesus didn't just die. Had he just died, it would have proved absolutely nothing. Everyone who's ever been crucified has died. But we believe that he rose. That's what sets him apart. He actually beat the biggest problem that you and I have, which is death. As I heard someone say recently, over the centuries, humanity has perfected ways to kill people. We can now do hundreds of thousands of deaths at a time. But we can't bring a single person back to life. But Jesus did it. See, the Bible says this world doesn't exhaust our stories. There is a world to come, a future that can deliver what you desire. A God who isn't just with you in the storm. He promises that one day a final morning will come when you can have all the rest that you so desire, the rest that you were made for, because he is in control and he can actually deliver that. God being in control doesn't mean that everything goes the way we want. Doesn't mean we even understand everything. But as Megan said, it does mean that we don't have to keep grasping for control that we can never get. We can find rest knowing that someone else is taking responsibility, and that ultimately our stories can finish in a place that is good and perfect and full of peace and rest. I guess the question I'd have for you this evening in thinking this through is, imagine if that day in my office had gone slightly differently. Imagine if I'd run after my boss and grabbed the files back because I was either too proud to accept the help, or I didn't want to give up control of those cases. I wanted them to be mine. How do you think my story on that day or that week would have ended if I'd adopted that course of action? God invites us to come to know him, to be in relationship with him, the God who made us, that we might recognize how good it is that he is in control. Thank you so much for listening, whether you're here or whether you're at home. I hope you found it helpful. If you've got any more questions, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to speak with you more. I hope you find it helpful. Thanks again to Megan and for Jess. I just wish you a very good evening. Thank you for listening.